Good morning, everybody. It is Cathy here at the Magical Urban Vegetable Garden. Wishing you a happy Mother's Day. I hope you are all having a great weekend. Leave me a comment below if you're showing up here, or rather later. I realize lots of you are probably having like Mother's Day breakfasts and such. But I hope this helps. Today's topic is about compost tea and various ways of fertilizing your plants naturally or with or natural or organic ingredients, but specifically compost tea. Now, if you've been in the gardening world a while, you probably have heard of compost tea, maybe even tried it out with fantastic results. But if you're newer or haven't tried it out yet, you're probably going to find, if you do a Google on it, there's about 9,000 different ways of actually making compost tea, using compost tea, all these things. And I want to make this really simple for you, especially starting out, because, you know, too much information can just make it overwhelming and complicated, right? And I don't want that for you. So, for compost tea, what is compost tea? Basically, you're taking good compost, and we'll get what that entails here in a minute, and you are making it into like a sun tea. You put it in a big bucket with water and let it sit in the sun for a couple days, and you water your plants with it. So when you put any kind of nutrients, and you would know this from making regular tea or making actual sun tea that you would drink, like with black tea and lemon and all that, warmth brings the nutrients out of whatever ingredients you put in there, so that it flavors the tea. It makes it more available to your body, maybe if you're looking for nutrients out of it. And the same thing applies to making compost tea. And the great thing about this is that most of us, if we have compost piles in our backyard, you can make this for free. All you need is a bucket and water, and just put it out in the sun. Now, there's two main camps, if you will, of people who do compost tea. The first is the one that I do for a variety of reasons: lack of time, laziness, I don't know, whatever you call it, efficiency. But you can make compost tea with a bucket, like I said, water, and some good compost. The second group goes a step further and adds steps to it, making sure that it's aerated. You can let it sit and motate longer without bad bacteria taking over. Because if you let something sit in the sun for a few days, it's going to go bad. All the bacteria in there, the oxygen and everything, it's going to get used up. And it's going to start to smell. You can end up with bacteria you don't want in there. And so to keep it aerated, they'll add in something like a little fish tank bubbler just to keep it going. They'll start adding in extra ingredients, which is perfectly fine. But, maybe you don't have all these things to start. Maybe you don't have that option. Maybe you don't have the time. And so what I'm going to share with you here for the first part is super easy, and you can use it every time you water for pretty much all your plants. And it just takes advantage of stuff you already have. So a 5-gallon bucket, I'm going to say, if you have the option, try and find a food grade bucket, so that at least your plastics, while it's sitting in the sun and whatever, you're at least putting a little less plastic into your soil and into your liquid. You can go to local restaurants and supply places and ask if they have any extra food grade buckets that they're getting rid of. But if you don't, and I've been at that point in my life before where I just didn't have that option, and I used regular to at least get started and be able to grow food. And I totally get that. And all you need is some good well composted compost. And I say go with vegetable matter compost. We won't get into animal composts yet, just because they tend to be higher in nitrogen. For everyday watering, you want plant-based composts. So stuff like leaves and grass clippings and kitchen compost and everything that's been broken down. And it should be broken down to nice black compost that smells sweet and good, and sort your earthworms out of there, put them in your soil, and put a couple shovelfuls in the bucket, fill it up and put it in the sun. And I'm going to add a safety thing here, especially if you have kids and pets around. Make sure there's a piece of cardboard and a heavy rock or brick on top, just so nothing tragic happens with them. But put it in the sun for a couple of days, maybe give it a stir once in a while if you think of it walking by. But in a couple of days, you can take and stir it all up. I have people tell me, that they strain it out so that, they're not watering a sludge. My plants get the sludge. I just stir it up really well, and whatever's left over, I'll dump into a corner of the greenhouse or garden, or it goes back on the compost pile. I don't do straining, and I don't do, sorting and all that stuff. Keep it simple, right? You can if you like. Some people take and put all their compost matter into like a big sock or tie it up in a cheesecloth or whatever and put it in so they can just pull it out at the end. You can do that if you like, but you don't have to. So, it's whatever works for you and for your style. But to start with, keep it simple. Now, there's a lot of debate going on about whether, compost tea works and this and that. I don't know that there's been a lot of studies done on it, but what is the biggest thing about any topic? It's in the proof, right? And I'm telling you right now, there's thousands, probably millions of gardeners out there who have tried just regular compost tea from their compost pile out back and had amazing results. So if you're skeptical about this or you're not sure about this, do an experiment this summer. Do half of your garden with and half without. Try it out and see. What are the results? Do you see any difference in a couple of months? What's your production like? The proof is in the results, right? And I strongly suggest you try this out because it's one of the easiest things you can do. Now, if you don't have a compost pile, you can still make manure tea. Like with earthworm compost, you can buy bags of it at your local plant supply place and whatever. You can get this stuff, and it doesn't take a lot. You can take and make sun tea. Oh, oops, my camera's being all silly here. You can take and make sun tea, in those big gallon jars. By putting in a good handful of your manure and setting it in the window. Maybe you're in an apartment or condo. You can be innovative with this and leave it for a couple of days and use it on your house plants and whatever else. Now, when you get into manure teas with animal composting, you want to be a little bit more careful. You want to make sure that they are well composted, that they're broken down right to good organic matter. And you want to be careful with your hot composts. Hot composts are things like your chicken and cow manure. They have a lot more nitrogen to them, which is good if you're digging it into the soil. But you can really overdo it with your plants, especially if they're heading towards flowering and fruiting. Too much nitrogen is just as bad as too little. So I tend to be very careful with it because I already give my plants a good organic, fertilizer. I dig compost into my soil. So if I'm going to it's the same thing like with fish fertilizer and stuff. You maybe do it once or twice a month or however it is, especially if you've got other fertilizers going on. You don't want to overdo it. All right. But you can use it if you are using, you can use stuff like composted rabbit and sheep and horse manure. They aren't hot. They're not nearly as high in nitrogen. And so when they're really well composted, you can basically use them on anything. So if you want to add a little bit, of animal manure to your thing, those are especially ones that work really well if you're going to use them more regularly. Now, what are the advantages of using this on a regular basis? Because if you're using just really good organic, plant-based manures, or not manures, composts on, your garden, there's a lot of bacterial activity and fungi activity that goes on in a garden, or should be going on in a garden. So when you take that stuff from your compost and you put it in a nice, warm, moist environment for a couple of days, it adds to your soil and your plants when you water it. So it helps improve your soil. It helps improve the nutrition of your plants. There's just a lot of benefits to it. So especially if you're struggling with, you know, poorer soil or building your soil up. This is something that it's just a no-brainer, and it's so easy to do. So easy to do. Now I want to, let's see here, make sure I haven't missed anything in my notes. Oh, if you're wanting to add, which I strongly suggest, you've probably heard about mycorrhizae, the fungi networking that comes like from mushrooms and other funguses under and in the soil, and how beneficial it is to your plants in your garden. And you know, we're discovering that, I mean, it's not just in gardens, we're discovering that forests have sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of miles of these underground networks that benefit all the different plants and trees. And as we take and dig these things, these forests up and stuff, we're destroying this network under the soil, and it is detrimental to the soil. Now you can add this to your soil by getting, like when you go to get bags of compost, you can add, you can compost mushroom manure. It's fantastic. I discovered, because it's still quite active. Now, just so you know, if you're buying bags of mushroom manure, generally speaking, they use horse manure for it because it is, you know, very easy to use. It's not like cow manure where you're in big danger of E. coli. It breaks down well. It's not hot. It won't damage your plants. And so when you buy this, it just means that this is stuff that's been used for growing like your white mushrooms at the grocery store. And they're getting fresh stuff, but it doesn't mean it's not good for your soil. So I discovered here a few years back that when you take and add this into your garden, you'll get white mushrooms growing. You're inoculating your soil, and you get your own white mushrooms if you keep it nice and damp and, you know, they've got a proper place to go. Take and add a good couple of handfuls of this to your compost tea. You're going to help keep those microbes going, and you're going to water it onto your soil. There's no downside to this. It's so easy. So that's something I do. Now, if you're wanting to get into aerating it, you do want to go get your little fish tank bubbler, you know, keep the air going and add, you know, 2 or 3 more days in the sun to it. I mean, you can absolutely do that, and you'll find all kinds of recipes. But what happens is of the bacteria and the fungi in there, in the water, after 2 or 3 days, any food that's available from the compost, they're going to start eating, which is when it starts smelling, the oxygen starts leaving, they just don't have any food left, and so then it starts turning anaerobic. And so you'll see recipes for adding in like a tablespoon of non-sulfur blackstrap molasses. Basically the sugars in it help feed the bacteria. And if you want to feed the fungi, any fungi in there, a little bit of like kelp granules or fertilizer, like you can get kelp like you do fish fertilizer. It's liquid. You can add a tablespoon in. It's going to help keep that growth going until you get it to actually water on your garden. And we're talking like a tablespoon to a 5-gallon pail. We're not talking huge amounts here, but it is very beneficial. So there's lots of ways to do this. There's thousands of places on the internet where you can look, but really you can just start with plain old vegetable compost, bucket and water, and you can notice very noticeable differences, I'm sure. So you'll have to let me know. We'll come back to this maybe towards the end of the summer, see who's tried this out, and you can, you know, send pictures or something. But I want to touch on some other things that are very helpful for naturally fertilizing your plants, or at least organically. You can take a look, like if you're building up your soil, and I always suggest, you know, making sure your soil is tested first. If you're in the US, you can call your local agriculture extension, and they will, most of them, you know, they'll come out and test your soil. I think first a nominal fee depending on where you live, but you can actually know what to add in instead of just second guessing it. They'll let you know your pH and all those things, so that you're applying with purpose rather than just randomly throwing money and product at it, and maybe it's not what you need. However, if you're researching, adding to your soil, like you've got clay soil or poor soil, or you're just looking to increase the mineral content overall, look into things like basalt rock dust or oyster shell flour or green sand. Green sand is a really good one. Glacial rock dust, alfalfa meal. Alfalfa meal is an amazing additive for soil, or even to your, throwing a handful into your bucket of compost tea. It does amazing stuff for your plants. Now I use, and please note, I'm not affiliated with them. I love the Gaia brand of organic fertilizers. You can add a scoopful below every tomato and pepper plant when you're transplanting, mix it in the soil, and then according to directions, give a little bit throughout the season. Helps build up the soil. It's got, mineral content and all that. Works really well. But there's lots of good products out there. I'm just pointing you in that direction here before, if you're not sure what to use. I also use fish fertilizer. Fish fertilizer, especially when your seedlings are starting out, like your tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and all those things that are heavy feeders. Especially before they get to the stage where they're getting ready to start flowering, you probably want to back off on it. But once they get their second or third set of true leaves, you can do a very mild solution like once a week. And it will give them micronutrients as well as the macronutrients. They grow nice, strong stems. They're healthy. They put down good roots. It's a great thing. If you don't want to use fish fertilizer, you can use, like I mentioned, you can use like kelp fertilizer. It also has a lot of micronutrients and trace elements that are just fabulous for your plants and your soil. And the last thing I want to touch on here is Epsom salts. Everywhere you go, you're probably seeing, Epsom salts this and Epsom salts that, and it's like a big elixir, and it kind of is. But I'm going to explain why here. Epsom salts are a combination of magnesium and sulfate. Okay. And sulfur in your garden is a trace element that most soils are missing. And magnesium is generally, most soils are shy of it. Like they don't have a lot in it. Not always true, which is why it's great to get tested. You don't want to overdo it. But the amounts that you use aren't a lot. Like when I'm mixing, like a fish fertilizer mix in my watering can. It's a 2-gallon watering can, and so per gallon I will dissolve like 1 tablespoon of Epsom salts. So, and I make sure it's dissolved first and well mixed in. Now, here's what Epsom salts does. You can read all kinds of stuff, but basically, especially your magnesium allows your plants, it helps your plants draw up nutrients better and helps them produce much more leafy green plants, helps them set fruit better, makes them a lot stronger. Okay, it greatly increases their ability to updraw nutrients, and this is why when you see recipes for like homemade weed killer, right? You're trying to get rid of those weeds out back. It will also add Epsom salts because it helps the weeds draw up the toxin better and helps kill them off better. That's all it does. So, you don't want to use it over everything. Now, there's some plants that really need extra, and there's some that let's see here, beans and, leafy green vegetables and stuff, they'll happily grow in very magnesium poor soil. But plants like your peppers and tomatoes and eggplants and all of those heavier feeders, roses are another one, which is why you'll often see with roses, making sure you add Epsom salts to them because they need that magnesium. And the great thing about any of this stuff, your compost tea, your Epsom salts and all that, you can also use them as foliar spray. You can get a spray bottle, dilute it down, and use it as a foliar spray. Early in the morning, don't do it when your plants are hot and in the sun because you'll burn them. You know, you don't want to do that. But they will also absorb a certain amount through the leaves. And this can be a good thing to do, you know, once they've started blooming and setting fruit, where you don't want to overdo, you know, especially your nitrogen and stuff. But if you've got a good compost tea mix, even with a little bit of fish fertilizer, you can spray it on the leaves and you're not overdoing it. So lots of different things to try this season. You can always leave me a comment below here, and I hope this helps. You're always welcome to send me a message, and you know, be sure to share this live with you know, anybody that needs it. Really appreciate it, and thank you for being here.